Good afternoon and welcome to the News Roundup for Thursday, November 6, 2025. It's day 37 of the longest federal government shutdown in U.S. history. I'm Bill Thomas, and here's what's happening right now. The Trump administration drastically cutting flights in dozens of major U.S. airports as our nation's unpaid air traffic controllers show increasing signs of strain due to the ongoing government shutdown. On Capitol Hill, former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi calling it a career following decades at the forefront of the Democratic Party. And a federal court issues a critical ruling which allows the Sunshine State to significantly restrict home and land purchases by Chinese citizens. Also, we'll tell you how the Trump administration's outstanding effort to protect our southern border is paying off in record numbers. And the largest healthcare provider in one New England state is backpedaling furiously after mistakenly sending out hundreds of condolence letters for a bunch of people who are still very much alive and kicking. All this and a bunch more coming up right now on the Big Roundup. We have a great deal to get to today, and we begin with this. Due to the devastating effects of the ongoing government shutdown, the FAA, or the Federal Aviation Administration, now significantly reducing air traffic in 40 of our country's busiest airports, just in time for the big holidays. Among the affected airports, those in New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, as well as a number of exceptionally active hubs, including Atlanta, also Dallas, Denver, and a bunch more. The FAA says that right now they're trimming flight schedules by 10% across the board at each of these airports in order to reduce the growing pressure on our nation's overburdened air traffic controllers. In case you're not aware, many of these controllers, they're either currently working without pay or calling in sick due to the shutdown, pushing the system to its limits. The FAA says that right now, our country's remaining air traffic controllers are becoming increasingly exhausted because not only are they currently working 6 days a week, also putting in mandatory overtime following each regular shift. And I'll say nothing spells loving like working overtime for free. The FAA says that they can't ignore the issue any longer. They've been analyzing a bunch of safety data to determine the best course of action moving forward, and that's in ordering the changes. They're trying to relieve the pressure where they think it's building up the most. I'll tell you where it's building up the most with folks like Davey and I and Engineer Jamie, the travelers. The schedule changes expected to impact hundreds of thousands of travelers daily throughout the U.S. A number of major airlines, folks like United, Delta, and American, they say they've already begun checking in with their customers to let them know about any potential flight cancellations. Final thoughts, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. You know, the Democrat shutdown, it's wreaking havoc on our country. Tons of government employees have been laid off. Other federal employees, air traffic controllers, as an example, now being forced to work and without pay. You should know that becoming a tower controller takes a great deal of training and education, a special license, by the way, from the FAA as well. And the job, it is brutally stressful and complicated. Therefore, it's inexcusable to turn those employees into unpaid workers or volunteers. There's now a shortage of those volunteers in the tower, flight delays and cancellations unbearable. And this new twist is going to make everything exponentially worse. So you know before you try to go. Flight cuts at dozens of our country's major airports will greatly affect arrivals and departures. And at this point, you might get to your destination quicker by pedaling your Schwinn. Oh, yeah, do some flight planning before you go, before you hit that trail. Try to find the downhill routes. And don't forget to wear reflective clothing. It's all about safety. Hey, here's the worst part. We're sending a message right now to the world that we don't know how to run our country. And with the world dangling on the precipice of World War III, I'll tell you, this is pathetic and terribly dangerous messaging. How do we help other nations end wars and eradicate global disease, address famine, and other critical issues if our own USA storefront is boarded up? Tell us what you're thinking, and we're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Producer Davey, we are cleared for takeoff, and who's launching first?
Okay, Bill, we start with Cynthia from Savannah, Georgia.
Hello, Cynthia. What are you thinking?
She says, our air system is worse than a third world country. It's a complete disgrace, and I blame the party in charge.
Well, don't blame the Republicans. This is the Democrat shutdown. It's all on them. It's not on us. And I'll repeat this. A couple of days ago, Mr. Fetterman, the esteemed gentleman from Pennsylvania, yeah, he's the guy with the D at the end. He's a Democrat. He says Democrats have to own the shutdown. I'll tell you, though, even without a government shutdown, our airlines have been dropping the ball for far too long. Flights are constantly delayed. Oftentimes, they are canceled, and the airlines do very little to address customer concerns. Also, the aisles, if you haven't noticed this, David, they're more narrow. The seats are kind of crammed together, no elbow room, packed in like sardines. And so, I traveled a long time ago. It wasn't always like this. All right, change things up just a bit now and shift our focus to Capitol Hill. This is where a well-known political giant now calling an end to her career following decades at the forefront of the Democratic Party. Well, I know this much. President Trump is going to miss you. Former two-time Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, announcing she will not be running for re-election to Congress in next year's midterms, bringing a close to a nearly 40-year run as a representative from California. Now, Pelosi was first elected to represent the San Francisco area in Congress back in 1987. She's held that position ever since, and she says she's planning to finish out the rest of her current term before she finally steps aside. Now, the 85-year-old, is it 85, Davey, or 185?
No, Bill, it's 85 years old.
Thank you for the correction. The 85-year-old says that during her time in Washington, both she and her followers have made a great deal of progress. Not really. That they've always led the way, not exactly led the way forward, she says, for our nation, and that now more than ever, they've got to continue to fight for the American democracy they hold very dear. So, this is not a very pleasant person. Pelosi was the first woman ever to hold the position of House Speaker from 2007 to 2011, and then again from 2019 to 2023. A number of Democratic leaders, including former President Barack Obama, says she'll go down in history as one of the best speakers in the history of our country. I got a thought on that. I'll share that in just a bit. Additionally, she was often a thorn in the side of congressional Republicans, and among the policies she championed over the years, the Affordable Care Act, the two-time House impeachment of President Trump, good job, and support for the committee which investigated the January 6th storming of the U.S. Capitol. Final thought, this is the News Roundup Lowdown. Like President Ford said way back in 1974 when he took over the presidency from my pal Richard M. Nixon. He said, "My fellow Americans, our long national nightmare is over."
My fellow Americans, our long national nightmare is over.
Yeah. Hate to steal that line from 38, but look, if the Jimmy Choo shoe fits, well, you know the rest. Madam Pelosi likes her quality shoes. Congratulations, America. The former Speaker of the House is finally calling it a day, stepping aside, and time now to roll the closing credits on the most frightening movie ever made. It's called Nightmare on Pelosi Street. Producer Dave, you ever see that movie, Nightmare on Pelosi Street?
Well, the nation's been watching it for a few decades now, Bill.
We have been watching it all unfold right in front of us. Now, Ms. Pelosi represented San Francisco for close to 40 years, and a quick checkup on the city by the bay. And look, I'm not there, but here's what some folks are saying about the town with the goofy bridge. You got the homelessness, drugs, crime, filth, public safety, and a whole bunch more. It's not all doom and gloom, but I've been there and I have no plans for a return visit. Although the rock band Journey is from the Bay Area, so San Francisco, yeah, you got something right. Kudos to the soon-to-be retiree. She's held down a government job for a bunch of decades, and rumor around town is she's now worth over, check this out, 100 million clams. Now, I'm no math genius, Davey. I'm not good with numbers, but how does a government servant, end up with that kind of coin? $100 million bucks? Are you curious?
Seems to me like a whole bunch of public servants have that kind of money, Bill.
Yeah, I'm mildly curious about that one. By the way, former President Barack Obama, as we mentioned a moment ago, said Pelosi will go down in history as one of the best speakers the House of Representatives has ever had. Well, I can't argue that. Perhaps he was making reference to the then Speaker of the House tearing up a copy of President Trump's State of the Union address immediately after he finished delivering it to a joint session of Congress. I saw that all unfold on national TV back in 2020. Yeah, very mature, nonpartisan, highly distinguished. Well done, Madam Pelosi. You tried to humiliate the president, and you ended up making a complete fool of yourself in front of the entire world. Your thoughts, comments on Ms. Pelosi, chime in, and we're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Davey, somebody must have something to say about this.
Yeah, we've got Mario checking in from Allentown, Pennsylvania.
I would have thought Mario, but Mario, I kind of like the sound of that. Mario, what are you thinking?
He says, good riddance, Madam Pelosi.
Yeah.
You've disgraced the hallowed halls of Congress for long enough, and for the good of the country, your departure is long overdue.
Yeah, step aside now. There's a new crew in town. I also want to kind of know why she vilifies, Davey, the wealthy people. She accuses them of not paying their fair share when she has enough money right now to buy her own island nation. Just kind of curious about that. Although maybe the other rich people are evil, but if she's rich, it's kind of okay. That sort of makes sense. All right, change course now. Turn our attention to a critical legal ruling which could have a significant impact on efforts by the Chinese Communist Party to increase their presence right here in the U.S. A federal appeals court just decided moving forward, Florida can now effectively ban all people who live in China from buying property in the Sunshine State unless they already own homes or land there, and that was prior to July 2023. In issuing their decision, the court rejected claims that a Florida law which requires Chinese citizens to register their properties with the state is improperly motivated by racism against people of Asian descent. That's a bit of a reach. Now, as one judge points out, that law had nothing to do with any sort of racism at all. Of course not. Instead, he says it was prompted by a number of legitimate food, land, and national security concerns. It all makes perfect sense. Florida's Attorney General celebrated the win, saying that the law will prevent ownership of land in his state by the Chinese Communist Party. Now, the ACLU, who represented the plaintiffs, say they plan to continue fighting against any laws which blatantly target immigrants based on their national origin and ethnicity. Calm down. Nobody's being targeted. And final thought, this is the News Roundup Lowdown. I just can't object to a law which prohibits Chinese citizens from purchasing real estate and land, with certain exceptions, in Florida. And clearly, this should not be a state law. Rather, this should be a federal law. Everybody's got to get on board, put us all on the same page. It's by no means discriminatory. It's a law intended to protect our country. It's that simple. There are far too many people and organizations from China who are buying up a great deal of land right here in our country, and much of that land just a skosh too close to our military bases. And this should be very alarming to all of us. Now, we don't really know why these individuals and groups are here, what they're doing, what if they have any ties. They may have ties to the Chinese Communist Party. We don't know. For now, though, at least Florida State Governor, the Honorable Ron DeSantis, he's standing up, defending his state, demanding accountability, and protecting his citizens from what could be a sincere critical threat. By the way, an American citizen would most likely be met with similar restrictions if they were attempting to purchase land or real estate in China or a number of countries all over the planet. All right, tell us your thoughts and your comments. You'll catch us at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. I'm watching this one very carefully, Davey. Are folks kind of keyed up about this?
Oh, yeah, Bill. You know what they're going to say. We have a guy named Duke checking in from Big Wyoming.
Hello, Duke. What are you thinking?
He says this is a no-brainer. Why anyone would let communist spies buy up American land and homes is beyond me.
Now, I understand what you're saying. I'm not going to take that reach and call them all communist spies, but there is that potential. And look, I'm an American, and while I want visitors from all over the planet to be treated with dignity and respect while they're here in the country, I also kind of want the federal government to kind of watch our back, protect the U.S., and like President Trump always says, America first. Now, some additional headlines we are keeping a very close watch on here in the News Roundup newsroom. And up first, as the longest shutdown in our country's history rolls on, hundreds of thousands of federal workers are now in extreme danger of missing out on yet another round of paychecks. One bipartisan think tank warning that if the closure continues much longer, federal employees could collectively miss out on, check this out, more than $20 billion in back wages. Hey, you got to pay the staff, man. Are turning now to the Motor City, Detroit's newly elected mayor, making waves with her plan to tap into a groundbreaking Michigan state fund and make direct cash payments to thousands of pregnant women in her city. And that program providing expectant moms with $1,500 during their pregnancy, as well as $500 a month for up to a year after they give birth. And a spot of breaking news concerning our national security, U.S. Customs and Border Protection. They're called CBP. I prefer KFC, but they're called CBP, announcing that last month they had the lowest number of border encounters in any October in our country's history. They say the number of crossings are down nearly 80% from the same time last year, and that right now we have the most secure border we've ever had. Or as Kamala Harris calls it, her worst nightmare. We'll scoot on over now to the world of business and a quick gander at a couple of stories making headlines in finance, also the market, and more. And leading off, you got to hear this. Union members at Starbucks voting to go on strike and threatening to hit the picket lines in less than a week unless the coffee giant finalizes a brand new contract agreement. Check out their demands: an immediate 65% pay increase, as well as additional payments for working on the weekend. 65% increase, that sounds kind of appropriate if maybe you're a brain surgeon or, for example, something real important like a podcast host. But for a barista, Davey, a 65% raise, does that sound right to you?
Somebody's got to pay for them high-priced coffees, Bill.
Yeah, but $1,200 for a cup of coffee, come on. All right, cruising along, and a bit of good news for the driving force behind Tesla. The electric vehicle company's shareholders voting to approve a potential $1 trillion pay package for the CEO, a little-known guy named Elon Musk, making it the largest executive compensation plan in history. Davey, $1 trillion, that sounds like a lot of dough, but I'm thinking about it, crunching some numbers in my head. After taxes, that $1 trillion, that can't be more than what, 844 billion bucks? That sound right?
You're right, Bill. I guess he's just going to have to squeak on by.
Yeah, I might buy one of those used Teslas, not one of the new ones. And on a more sobering note, here's another all-time record for you. Total household debt in the U.S. climbing to nearly $19 trillion last quarter as Americans continue to rack up massive bills and increasingly struggle to keep up with their payments. We are a nation in massive debt. You gotta quit charging junk. Pay cash, or at least pay cash when you can. And a quick look at the lighter side of news, kicking things off today by making a run for the border, doing the do and taking a gigantic bite out of a slice of neon green pie. Now, David, you say neon green pie or neon green pie? Which one?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Bill. I'm going to go with neon green pie.
I think I'm kind of with you. Neon green pie. I don't like neon green pie. Taco Bell introducing a brand new dessert and calling it Mountain Dew Baja Blast Pie. What could possibly go wrong? They say the turquoise-colored pastry on a graham cracker crust is packed with soft drinks, tangy citrus flavor, has buttery undertones as well, and is piled sky high with whipped cream, making it what one Taco Bell officials call the best thing she's ever eaten. No kidding. Just makes absolutely no sense to walk in or drive through a burrito factory and order a Mountain Dew Baja Blast Pie. And I'm not being mean, but it kind of looks like Comet-flavored Soylent Green. It's like going to a French bakery and ordering up an enchilada plate and a steaming hot bowl of menudo. Now, that'd be just dumb. I'm putting this one on the do not buy list. All right, chugging right along. One extraordinary train trip in Poland is going viral after passengers on the ride spotted a sheep wearing a diaper strolling down the center aisle. Now, one Polish lawmaker is now calling for an investigation, claiming that the unusual traveler was the victim of animal abuse and that it would much been better off riding in a cattle car. Wearing a cotton diaper, though, it's odd, but it's not exactly abuse. Hey, here's the bottom line. Hey, Dave, you see what I did there? A sheep wearing a diaper, and here's the bottom line.
Well done, Bill. Well done.
Pretty well done. Look, here's the bottom line. Sheeps are peeps, too, and if you're good enough to ride the train, then so is that wool sweater providing grass-grazing farm animal. And if you're that offended by the diaper-wearing, train-traveling creature, then I say, moving forward, no lamb chops for you, for life. Now, if you're concerned about the dangers of AI, check this out. Officials for Maine's largest healthcare provider apologizing profusely after a computer error caused them to send out hundreds of condolence letters to the families of people who are, in fact, still alive. Oops. They say the program has since been corrected to keep that from ever happening again. You know, computers, in my mind, they've made life better for each and every one of us, all over the planet. Sure, sometimes they kind of lock up. There's malware and spyware, hacks and viruses so destructive a mosquito would be envious. You got the cyber attacks, the crashed hard drives, not enough RAM, and a bunch more. And yeah, every now and again, a computer tells you you're no longer alive and well. Therefore, like I said, computers have made life better for all of us. Maine Health, good job. And now time for us to call it a wrap on the Thursday edition of the Big News Roundup. And before we go, as we do each and every day, right here on the program, we share with you a very notable quote. And these profound words, they come to us today from the great P.T. Barnum, who said, "The noblest art is that of making others happy." Barnum was a 19th century American showman and a businessman who thrilled the nation and went on to form the renowned Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. And as legend would have it, he also repeatedly claimed there's a sucker born every minute. Now, Davey's also the guy who opened up a chain of bookstores. You left that part out.
What are you talking about, Bill? I don't know what you're talking about.
Davey, Barnum and Noble Bookstores? You never heard of that?
Bill, that's Barnes and Noble bookstores. He had nothing to do with that chain, which started decades after he was around.
Barnes and Noble, not Barnum. Got it. I'll make a note of that. And now it is time for us to bust on out. But before we go, don't forget the News Roundup motto. Ask not what your podcast can do for you. Ask what you can do for your podcast. And all we ask you to do is hit that little subscribe button. It's real easy. That way you never miss even a single episode. And that looks like our time. Yeah, it's officially up. So have an awesome day today. Please stay safe, and let's all continue to watch out for one another. With that, Engineer Jamie, please let's dim the lights. We're going to fade to black, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow afternoon.